Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Israeli politics disrupt the U.S., Israel's Oscar nominee, Better Call Saul, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's scheduled speech before Congress continues to generate more controversy than perhaps any matter of U.S.-Israeli relations in recent years. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, who is Jewish and is already running for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2016, has said he won't attend the speech. Jewish Democratic Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii has also said he won't attend. Particular furor has been raised over Netanyahu's claim in a speech on Sunday in which he declared himself a representative of all Jews around the globe. Speaking to a gathering of Likud Party members about his recent trip to Paris and his upcoming trip to Washington, he said he, quote, came to Paris not only as the Prime Minister of Israel, but as a representative of the entire Jewish people. Just as I arrived there in Paris, thus I shall arrive to any place where I'm invited. This has led to specific pushback from the liberal American Jewish lobbying group J Street, asking its fellow partisans to declare, "No, Mr. Netanyahu, you do not speak for me," and sharing the hashtag on Twitter, "Bibi doesn't speak for me." It's a campaign that reportedly gathered 20,000 online supporters. Meantime, a poll in Israel found that a plurality of Jewish Israelis thought Netanyahu should cancel the speech. The Army Radio poll on Monday had 47% saying Netanyahu should cancel, 34% saying he shouldn't cancel, and 19% saying they didn't know. But speaking of large numbers and what the Israeli public knows, a former chief rabbi of Israel has now been officially indicted for allegedly taking more than $2.6 million in bribes. Former Ashkenazi chief rabbi Yonah Metzger was arrested last year. The indictment claims Metzger received kickbacks, such as one alleged example in which a Russian businessman who wished to convert his son and daughter to Judaism paid a total of $36,000 to Metzger and a rabbi whom Metzger recommended. But a bribe and kickback scheme here in the United States has nabbed a series of Hasidic Jews in what is reported by the New York Daily News as one of the biggest corruption crackdowns in years. A dozen building inspectors have been arrested on bribery charges, alongside a number of landlords and other real estate professionals. An estimated 10 of those arrested are Satmar Hasidim. Elsewhere in New York, a Jewish charity called F.E.G.S Health and Human Services is reportedly under investigation by two law enforcement agencies after the charity recently announced it would close upon discovering a shortfall of more than $19 million. But it's not all horrible news in the world of Jewish crime. Victims of Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme are set to receive a new payout of more than $300 million, the fifth payout in a series that has brought victims $7.2 billion. According to the trustee of the Madoff recovery efforts, everyone with an allowable claim of just under $1 million has received full restitution of their principal investments. With all these criminal allegations about, you might think there's a major need for criminal defense attorneys in the Jewish community. Well, a major character on the award-winning series Breaking Bad was a lawyer who pretended to be Jewish. Christian Eaton stopped by the 92nd Street Y for a discussion of the new spin-off series, Better Call Saul.
Oh, hello. I was just working on a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for one of my clients. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, a lawsuit sounds good, Saul, but who can I sue? Who can you sue?
He's the lawyer that every shady-dealing TV character should have on speed dial if they get pinched by the authorities in Albuquerque, New Mexico. On the acclaimed AMC series Breaking Bad, Saul Goodman presented himself to prospective clients as a vaguely Jewish legal eagle, ready to hire for the right price and willing to take cash from the town's two biggest crystal meth dealers to get them out of trouble. But in reality, Saul Goodman is Jimmy McGill, a small-time personal injury specialist with Irish roots. This past week saw the debut of the character's very own AMC series, Better Call Saul, and Saul himself, Bob Odenkirk, took the stage at the 92nd Street Y with fellow cast members to discuss the new show and his thoughts on the character.
I like him a lot, and in Breaking Bad, I wouldn't say I like that guy that much. I mean, I like playing him, but if I met him, I wouldn't hang out with him. But I do like Jimmy McGill a lot, and I think audiences will too. But Saul Goodman was always just the public face of this guy. His real name was James McGill. We learned that the first time we met him. That silly facade of an office, that ridiculous columns, and the Constitution. It was always a show he was doing. And just a blown up version of what anyone does when they go out in public and be the public face of themselves. And now we're going to meet him when he's with his family.
A family that includes brother Chuck, a fellow lawyer going through a rough personal patch, and played by Michael McKean. The character is new to this series, and McKean recalled his excitement of being recruited for the role by executive producer Vince Gilligan.
I accepted, of course, without reading a thing. So just, of course I want to work with you guys. And so he has an affliction, that's all I knew. And my nightmare was, after I'd accepted the role, oh, thank God, we're going to Albuquerque, yeah! I was afraid that I'd get a call from Vince saying, well, it's rampant psoriasis. He's covered from head to toe in running sores. Now, first day makeup will be about 6.5 hours, maybe 7. But we'll get it down to 3.5.
But the opportunity to join one of television's most anticipated new shows, spinning off from one of its most popular, proved too much of a temptation.
Really fun to follow in the backdraft of a huge hit, obviously. I've worked with Vince Gilligan on X-Files. Various times we tried to work together, geographically didn't work out, and so when this came down the pike, I said, yeah, Odenkirk, Gilligan, what's not to like?
To hear more from the cast of Better Call Saul from the 92nd Street Y, please tune in to the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. One of the major examples of civil court disputes in the Jewish community of late has been that over Jewish divorce. A film dramatization of that is Israel's nominee for an Oscar, and Rebecca Honig-Friedman sat down with the filmmakers to talk about it.
למה? אתם אומרים שאי אפשר לכפות עליו גט, ואי אפשר להכריח אותו לבוא, ואי אפשר את זה, ואי אפשר את זה, ואי אפשר את זה, ומה איתי?
Brother and sister filmmaking team Ronit and Shlomi Alkabetz didn't set out to transform Israeli divorce law with their newest film, Get, The Trial of Vivian Amsalem. Rather, they say, they were following to its logical next step the story they began telling 11 years ago with 2004's To Take a Wife, the first of what is now 3 films, along with 7 Days, co-written and directed by the siblings, and starring Ronit, a well-known Israeli actress, as Vivian, alongside actor Simon Abkarian as Vivian's husband, Elisha.
Our question was, what would have happened if we take this couple that we follow for so long and we pour their story into their Israeli law system? How would the law system cope with this man and woman? This woman want to get a divorce. The husband says no. All right, let's take it to court and see if the laws can help them, if the state can help them.
As the resulting movie depicts, the state does not provide an easy resolution to such a case. Get, The Trial of Vivian Amsalem, which opens on February 13th in New York and Los Angeles, tells the story of Vivian's several years-long battle to divorce her husband, a battle that many real Israeli women have had to fight as well. That's because in Israel, where there's no such thing as civil marriage or divorce, all divorce cases must go through the state-run rabbinic courts, where they get resolved according to Orthodox Jewish law that requires a husband consent to divorcing his wife by giving her a get, the Jewish divorce document after which the movie is named. If a husband does not agree to give the get, the wife is essentially stuck in her marriage, the situation in which Vivian finds herself in the movie. And Get is, for the first time, giving mainstream audiences a window into what it's like for an Israeli woman to go through the often secretive process of divorce and get refusal.
And it's the first time in Israel that we have the real chance to see what's happened behind these closed doors. So it's, voila, you can see everybody and also us, and now start to think what we can do.
Get, the movie, gets the details right, according to writer and feminist activist Alana Marilis-Stockman, author of The War on Women in Israel.
I've spent a lot of time with women going through where they go through getting divorced, and it's all very real. You know, the interactions and the personalities and the kind of dialogue and the kind of things that the judges say to the woman, it's all real. It tells the story very effectively of what women have to go through when they want to get divorced in Israel.
In fact, the film has been so effective at raising awareness about what women go through in rabbinic court proceedings that it's going to be screened at the annual convention of rabbinic court judges.
I think it's going to be something very big, and after watching that film, I cannot imagine they could stay the same judges. Coming to their court the next day, trying to judge a case, you know. I don't think they could forget the image of themselves watching them, seeing it.
For more on Get, the trial of Vivian Amsalem, which opens on February 13th in New York and Los Angeles, watch the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Rebecca. A play revival tackles the theme of feminism while planting a flag for feminism behind the scenes as well, as Meredith Gansman reports for a segment from our theater show, Row J.
The Heidi Chronicles is Wendy Wasserstein's 1988 Tony Award-winning play that follows art historian Heidi Holland and her friends over 20 years. Mad Men star Elizabeth Moss plays the title character.
It was sort of very ahead of its time, this play, and very, you know, they were asking questions that we deal with every day today as women. And I think that the way that this particular play deals with the baby boom generation, though, and this kind of particular time when women they had picked up the mantle of feminism and then sort of weren't quite sure what they were supposed to do with it now. And I think that that is something that Wendy wanted to explore and something that we're, you know, kind of trying to find the right way to ask those questions.
Bryce Pinkham plays Peter Patrone, one of Heidi's friends.
And so I think it's important to remind people of how far we've come from that time, but also take a look at it and see, well, how far do we still have to go?
And how does Moss relate to her feminist character?
Heidi has a line in the play where she says, someone asks her if she's a feminist, and she says, I'm a humanist. And I think that's feminism, you know. I don't think it's about being a man or a woman, it's just about human rights. And
cast member Jason Biggs says the character of Heidi is a lot like playwright Wendy Wasserstein.
So much of Heidi, Wendy is in Heidi. I mean, so much of Wendy is in all of her characters, but the Heidi Chronicles is really a very personal story for her. I just want to do right by her.
Biggs plays another of Heidi's friends, Scoop Rosenbaum.
He's a little arrogant. He's very smart. He's very confident, but borderline cocky, and you know, I think ultimately he's likable. I mean, I do.
Mensch-like, if you will.
I might call him a mensch. I don't know.
For more on the Heidi Chronicles, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, this week on Up Close, we're looking at new kinds of warfare, including the consequences for non-combatants. Many people talk about the idea that cyber warfare is coming and that we'll someday be seeing large-scale attacks that have ramifications in the real world. But senior correspondent at the Daily Beast, Shane Harris, reports that cyber war is here and has been for some time. We discuss the reality and the consequences in his book, At War, The Rise of the Military Internet Complex. To know more about war and what our businesses and governments are doing, we need reporting on these things, but journalists are increasingly facing great dangers in their profession. Executive Director of the Committee to Protect Journalists, Joel Simon, is the author of The New Censorship: Inside the Global Battle for Media Freedom. Here's some of the highlights from my interview with Shane Harris. I think in the popular imagination, certainly in the popular reporting, there's all this hand-wringing and so forth that cyber warfare is coming. Cyber warfare could come in this way, could come in that way, but in fact, it's here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you can go back even to the mid-1990s and find people who were working in the intelligence community in the U.S. who were talking about the day would come when we would be reliant on computer networks to the point that they would make vulnerabilities for us. So, you know, our electrical power grid and our utilities and all of these things that run off the internet. But also that would be a great place for our intelligence agencies to exploit and to steal information from other countries and to do damage to them. And really, you see this kind of taking off even in the early 2000s and mid-2000s, particularly in the war in Iraq, where we deployed a lot of offensive cyber espionage and cyber attacks. So it's coming into the fore now in the public consciousness, and policymakers are talking about it, but it really has been something that the military and the intelligence community have been practicing for quite a while.
Well, let's talk about the Stuxnet virus with Iran for a little bit, because that was a project that was first widely credited to Israeli intelligence, but then President Obama took specific credit for the United States on some of that once it really hit. And then in your reporting, you show it going back well into the Bush administration.
Yeah, this is a program that really begins under Bush, who we should also add to, in the latter part of his term in office, really did come to embrace both the idea that America was vulnerable to cyber attack, but also that the United States had significant capabilities to do cyber attacks against other countries. And Stuxnet was one of these examples. And so what we now know is that the NSA, working with Israel, developed this computer code, essentially, that told the computers in the uranium enrichment plant at Natanz to spin the centrifuges in such a way that they would break down. Bush, I think, really embraced this as one of the key methods or techniques they had for trying to forestall Iran's development of a nuclear weapon. And when President Obama was coming into office, the two of them met when President Obama was president-elect, and Bush told him there are a couple of programs that you need to maintain, one of which was the use of drones, and the other was this program known as Olympic Games at the time. And I think that Bush really saw this as sort of at the forefront of the leading edge of our capabilities in a way of, short of actually bombing the Iranians, of trying to forestall their development of a weapon. And in a way, I think they sort of viewed it as a way of trying to keep the peace, even though you could look at it as an act of war. I mean, if we had gone and bombed that facility, that would have been seen as clearly an aggressive action. Putting a computer code in it that causes damage to the centrifuges as well, that kind of gets close to that category too.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish Channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast available on iTunes or in your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 1640, Iowa Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Cox Cable Channel 1, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and on Comcast and the on-demand menu on premium channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.